We are so blessed to be able to be here together and to be celebrating all of these wonderful, wonderful elements that we learn in New Thought. And our message affirmation today is, through consciousness, I can make it happen. And we absolutely can. And that's probably a lot of words and a lot of great statements up there, but some of you may be saying, well, exactly what do you mean by that? Through consciousness, I can make it happen. Because I know it sounds a little too almost magical and perfect. And this is one of the challenges of being in New Thought, is we sort of get assaulted a lot with being told that, well, you're just sort of manipulating things to work for you, and, anybody can go out and, make up this whole new set of rules and say that's the way life is and everything can be good. And a lot of really conservative faith beliefs do feel that way about New Thought. And I am reminded, a few weeks ago, I saw actually on the television, they'd done this documentary about the life of Norman Vincent Peale. And I don't know if very many of you are familiar with him. And he was a conventional Protestant minister for years and years. And he eventually wrote the book, The Power of Positive Thinking, which for its time, it was just phenomenally successful. And it sold, millions of copies, so much more than anybody had ever anticipated. And after it had its initial, rise of great popularity and fame, a lot of Christian media, newspapers and things, because this was in the 50s, 60s, and I think we had a lot more print media back then, and certainly a lot more Christian print media. And they did really, criticize him a lot, saying that, God isn't made to be your servant. You don't turn these things around just because it suits you. Because we know in New Thought and in positive thinking, when we have a circumstance or situation, we know that if we direct our mind and we think positive and we live our lives as these great, positive people, that things do happen for us. And so, of course, there was a lot of criticism for that. And so in today's affirmation, we want to go back and understand that it is through consciousness that we can make things happen. So despite the fact that there is, this criticism out there, and despite the fact that it might seem a little, Pollyanna or a little mystical or magical, the reality is we can see through so many examples the fact that our consciousness, our conscious thinking, our conscious and mental approach to everything in life affects so much how it's going to transform, or how a situation is going to resolve, or any circumstance or situation. So we know that through consciousness, we can make it happen. And we spoke earlier this year, and it's probably time for us to come together and see how things turned out when we had our experiment in love, where we hopefully every day took some time and had a circumstance or situation that we didn't have the answer to, but we knew that some resolution was needed. And we were just to see it in the light. We weren't to predetermine how the situation or circumstance was going to resolve. We just see it flooded in the light and love of God and know that it is going to resolve to its very highest and best possible resolution. And that is, of course, through our consciousness, using our consciousness. And I can know very, very personally so many times when a circumstance or situation arises, especially as I've talked about many times. I have a small business, and like any small business, your payroll days are always kind of you get a few beads of sweat as you get closer, and you're not sure that your numbers are going to match. And so by connecting with the divine, by aligning myself with God and my consciousness, and sometimes maybe, we're a little short, or we have to do a little dancing, but all of that anxiety and that upset leaves because I know to connect my consciousness to God, because I can make it all happen. It's a challenge because, it's easy for me to sit here and say, well, you know what, think positive about this circumstance or situation, and it's all going to turn out well, and then go and have a cup of coffee and hope everything's going to be fine. But a lot of people, there's always a lot of naysayers, and for people who haven't been in New Thought for many, many, many years, it can be a challenging issue to grasp and a challenging thing to hold on to and understand and believe. And so we use in New Thought so many tools. We use our meditations, and we use our responsive readings, and we use all these things to turn our consciousness to this place of positiveness so that we understand that it's the way that we think about things. It's our positive outlook. It's the way that we're approaching everything in life that makes it what it is. And so when we have a circumstance or situation that we approach from a negative point of view, or we're always griping and complaining about a situation, I'm sure if you look back over your life, you can realize it probably never really resolves for the best, because you're putting so much negative energy into that your consciousness is making that happen. So just as well as your consciousness can make the good positive things happen, your consciousness can make the negative and untoward things happen in your life. So as you think about your consciousness and knowing that it can make it happen, it's important to understand and be connected with the divine in every circumstance and every situation. You know, we talked too about the fact that we can have this great desire for a circumstance or situation. We have an issue before us that needs to be resolved. Maybe we have a fractured relationship or a big financial challenge, or we have a bad diagnosis from the doctor. And these things certainly weigh us down because we're all human. We're all living the human experience. And it's natural that our first reaction is going to be to respond as a human being, though we need to stop and understand that we're also spiritual beings, and we need to use our consciousness to make the good out of these situations. So if we have a fractured relationship with a family member, a loved one, a friend, a coworker, it's time to turn our consciousness towards the positive and make this relationship resolve, or make this problem, this challenge, resolve to its very highest good. And a lot of times that's just us changing the way that we're looking at the circumstance or situation. And the same with a health challenge. We know that in New Thought, some of the founding members of Unity, one of the New Thought faiths that we're so closely aligned with, Myrtle Fillmore and her husband started this because she had an illness, and she'd gone to a lecture, and she began daily affirmations that she is a child of God and she doesn't inherit illness. And it took many years, but she did become healed. And we know that through that consciousness, she made it happen. And so you and I and all of us, we all have this option. We all have this opportunity to turn our consciousness to a place where change is happening. We can make it happen. We can make the good happen. And the same with our financial situations. When we come to a place where we have an obligation and the balance in our checking account isn't going to cover it, we know rather than getting excited or upset, to start focusing and visualizing prosperity and connecting with the divine. And, you know, we're not saying that coins are magically going to fall out of the air into your bank account. But you know what? We get inspired, or we find workarounds, or so many other things happen that we never thought to think of, or we didn't expect, because it took connecting with the divine. It took our consciousness connecting with the divine to get to that place of understanding that we overcome this financial challenge, and we do enjoy this prosperity. And that's a big part of New Thought, is we talk a lot about prosperity. And prosperity is many things. You can be prosperous in your health, you're prosperous in your family and your relationships, and of course prosperous financially. Because as I talk about so often, we are meant to have lives of great happiness and great health and great prosperity. We start this through our consciousness, by consciously thinking about these positive things, by consciously connecting to the divine, rather than letting ourselves become fractured and disconnected when something bad happens and getting upset and overly emotional. We connect with the divine through our consciousness, and we can make it happen. So in every circumstance, in every situation, you can make what needs to happen in your life happen, and it all begins right here. It all begins in our consciousness. So this week, as you take a moment to reflect, ask yourself this question: am I using the power of mind? Am I using my consciousness in the good way that I know I need to be? Or am I allowing myself to get overrun with emotion and fear so that I forget to be connected with the divine, especially in the face of a challenge or a critical situation? When we need to be most connected to God, oftentimes that's when we become the most disconnected because of fear and because of anxiety, and because we aren't using our consciousness and realizing that by connecting with the divine, by having that constant connection with the divine, we can make anything happen. We can make it happen, whatever it is. So ask yourself your question this week: am I using the power of mind? And if you find that there's a circumstance or situation where fear is overtaking you, or anxiety or worry, stop and remind yourself that, you know what, through consciousness, I can make it happen, and start using the power of mind, the power of that mind consciousness, that connection with the divine, to make all these great things happen in your life. Because we know that we are created in the image of God. God is perfect, therefore we are perfect, and we are indeed meant to have lives of great happiness and great health and great prosperity. And so make sure you take that with you, and as you start your week tomorrow morning and you look in the mirror, remind yourself of that I am meant to have a life of great happiness and great health and great prosperity, and go forth and start your week with that mindset. And of course, that is the first piece of the puzzle that you need to have in hand to go out and actually make that happen, because it all starts here. If we start off thinking, oh my God, I've got that horrible drive, my job is horrible, I'm never going to get ahead, I'll never make enough money, I'll never feel as good as I need to do the things I do, then of course we'll be using the power of consciousness to make that happen. And of course we want to avoid that. That's not what we want. So start with your mind connected to that ideal, and know that we are indeed children of God, and we are meant to have lives of great happiness and great health and great prosperity. And the good news is that through consciousness, by connecting to the divine power of God, we can make all things happen. The health challenges, the challenging relationship with a family member, a loved one, a friend, a neighbor, a coworker, the financial challenges can all be overcome by consciously collecting our mind with the divine mind, with God. And so go forth this weekend in all things, work. And it takes work. It takes work. But like any exercise, the more you do it, the better you get. Connect with that divine and get your life exactly where you want it to be. Because through consciousness, you can make it happen. All right, I'd like to invite you to join me in prayer. Eternal and loving God, we thank you for being such a constant presence in our lives. We thank you, Lord, for letting us connect with you, for that consciousness. And we thank you, Lord, for letting all things that we need to make happen in our lives possible through a divine connection with you. We thank you in the name of faith, hope, and love. Amen.